Whether you're a parent navigating myofunctional disorders or simply curious about optimizing your family's overall health, the Myohacker Podcast is your guide. Hi, I'm Karindy, a speech-language pathologist, myofunctional therapist, and a mom on a mission to bring holistic health to you and your family. Together, we'll explore whole-body connections and integrative solutions. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review to help other families discover this important information. Visit myohackerslp.com for free resources and guides. Quick disclaimer. The content shared in this podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast or its affiliates. This podcast does not provide medical, legal, or professional advice. Always consult a professional regarding your circumstances. By listening, you agree that the host and podcast are not responsible for any actions you may take based on the information provided. Now, let's dive into today's episode. We have here with us today a very special guest. This is Victoria Fisher. She is here as someone that is going to talk about an airway story with her son from the perspective of things sometimes going kind of according to the plan, finding out things, shifting, and then when to follow intuition as a mom and when to lean into clinical recommendations and that dance that honestly it's back and forth. So Victoria, I would love for you to share a little bit about Elijah and your journey up to this date.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Victoria Fisher, and thanks for having me on. So, with Elijah, around 6 months of age, I noticed that he stopped giving me eye contact. And before then, he was hitting every milestone ahead of time. And that was around the time when we turned on our heater, the 6-month time frame. And I just noticed he looked like he had a light in his eyes that had disappeared or had dimmed. And so I kind of started thinking like, oh my gosh, something's wrong with my kid. He was ahead of the curve and now I feel like he's completely slowed down. So I did bring it to my husband and he said, it's not a big deal. He's just changing, whatever it is. And so I thought maybe he's right. Like I am overthinking things. And around that time we introduced solids. And so I thought it was kind of normal for babies to be picky about foods, but he seemed to really not want to do anything with it. And so I kept thinking because I had previously been ill from mold for 5 years myself, I feel like this is mold. And so we kind of let time pass only because our house at the time was such a construction, money draining place. And so around 12 months of age for Elijah, I decided I need to look into this. He's still not eating appropriately. He's not where I feel he should be compared to where he was the first half of his first year of life. Mm-hmm. So I took him to, it was an SLP place, feeding therapy. Mm-hmm. And I felt like for us personally, just knowing where he was at and what I needed, all the things that they were doing with him at feeding therapy, I was already doing at home. So I had a little bit of a rewind. The first week he was born, I noticed that his upper lip kept caving in whenever I was trying to breastfeed. And knowing what I knew, all the things that I had researched, I thought this is definitely oral ties.
Okay, wait, I got to share that Victoria is a researcher. Absolutely. And I bet you were that way before Elijah about things.
Yes, only because the first round of mold, I had to take health into my own hands because every doctor I would go to, the labs would come back normal, but I felt like I was dying from the inside out. And so, I kind of just had to take it upon myself to go, all right, if no one's going to figure it out, I have to figure it out. So I did spend quite a lot of time researching mold. So I knew quite a bit about it, but yes. So we took him to chiropractors, an osteopath who did a phenomenal job for him, but it felt like, the breastfeeding journey never worked out. So we formula fed, but it felt like there was something more, like the lip ties. Every professional we saw, they'd say, he doesn't have one, he's fine. But it didn't feel that way. So fast forward again to where I was with the SLP feeding therapist. I asked if they could check for a lip tie and see if maybe he had grown into it more. So they looked and they told me, yep, he has a submucosal tongue tie and a lip tie. So we ended up going to an airway dentist who did the procedure on him, and it helped a little bit. His words became more clear, but the eating was just really bad. And I told my husband, I said, I feel like we need to see if there's mold, because knowing what I know about it, I just have this gut feeling. And he had seen how I had been, and I say this as humbly as I can, correct about everything. So he was in full support of it. So we finally went ahead and...
Smart man. Can we just say smart man?
Very smart man. Yes, very smart man. So I finally had decided to bring in a mold inspector. We tested the house. I did a urine test for myself and for Elijah. And both the testing of the house and our urine samples came back with elevated levels of mycotoxins.
And doctors had not ever entertained that kind of testing?
No, nobody. I think conventionally speaking, there is still so much work that needs to be done to be more root cause minded instead of just, I don't know, the way that it's kind of check you off the number list kind of feeling. But no, nobody had ever really thought about it. And so I, again, took it upon myself. And so, we were kind of already at wit's end with our house, the way that it was just constantly sucking up our money and our lives, to be very frank. It was a very turbulent time for both my husband and myself. So we were kind of like, all right, we'll remediate what we can, but we want to be done with this house. So we were able to move in with my parents for 3 months while we were looking for a home that was hopefully healthier than what we had, our old home built in the 70s. And so when we were with them, the first month that we were there, we decided we're going to wean him off of milk because that was all he would consume. He still wasn't eating solids.
And how old was he at this point?
At this point, I want to say like 16 or 18 months, somewhere around there. So a lot of time had passed from the lip tie release to where we're at now, or in the story.
And was he still doing feeding therapy with that practice, or like what interventions was he doing?
Yeah, so I had left the feeding therapy because, again, everything that they were doing, I was already doing at home. And so,
guys, she's not joking. Victoria really does it at home. She absolutely, she's just like a natural at therapy at home. Yeah.
But then we found you actually through a babysitter that had gone to you before. And so I didn't really know much about myofascial therapy or anything like that, CFT, but I was just so ready to help Elijah propel himself into the boy that I knew was hidden inside. Mm-hmm. And I would see him come alive with you. Like, you would implement, I don't even know, all kinds of things out of your toolbox. It's just like, I don't know what she's doing.
Sounds like a session with me. Yes, what is happening?
Great. And I would just I would go home and I would tell my husband, he looks like he shifts when he's with Karindy. And I think it was CFT. You do some of that. You do, I don't know, just all kinds of things. And I could tell, and this is while we were still living in that house before we moved out, I could tell that he wanted to come out, but he was still locked up. And so I thought, okay, well, I know I can keep going with Karindy, but I feel like something even more drastic has to happen. And so I think you and I had talked about potential mold in that house. And so it just kind of snowballed. And again, we bought the test for mycotoxins urine test. We did the mold testing, and being in the position that we're in, it is very privileged. I will acknowledge that. But we were also at our wit's end of how much more can we keep pumping into this house? It was a sickening amount of money. How much more can we keep pumping into therapies for Elijah? Then there's me, I want to get pregnant again. So I also need to get out of here for the sake of our second child whenever he or she may come. And just our health, the way everything was taking a toll on us, we decided to just fight as hard as we could with all the means that we had and create a better life for our son and for our future child, and of course us as well. because mentally we were not doing well, like at all. So yeah, we lived with my parents. We cut out milk completely with him the first month that we were there. We did a stool test for him too. And that came back really bad. There was like nothing good in his gut at all. And so we just decided to go cold turkey and switch over to kefir just so he still have some kind of dairy coming in. Mm-hmm. And I think it was 2 days in of doing that. Of course, he was reluctant and he kind of put up a fit with us. But as parents, you're like, I don't care. This is for your own good. He started to eat things that he'd never touched before. Bell pepper, protein, like just, who is this child? And then about a month and a half after living with my parents, we just started noticing his speech started to take off. And there was a sparkle in his eyes, just, I don't know, a really different kid. Still slightly locked up, but starting to emerge from whatever, prison he was in. I think you and I had talked about he had brain inflammation as well, because you taught me a move to do on his head. And so I noticed that started to decrease. He was more aware, more willing to converse with you, looked you in the eye a little bit more. And then about 3 months in, just a totally different kid. I mean, just like night and day difference. We moved into the house that we're in right now back in July, I think, of last year. And I mean, I don't even know what to say. He's just a totally different kid. He eats. He puts up the tantrums that he should. He's defiant as a toddler should be. He's joyful and happy and laughs and repeats words. And it's just like, this is what I've been missing. And there's that part of you too that feels guilt, right? Of what could my child have been like had this not happened? And it's really easy to mentally let yourself get there, but just recognizing that for whatever reason, things worked out the way that they did. And me as his mom and my husband as his father, we're coming together as a team to fight and create a better life for everybody in our family. And so I think just trying to remember to adopt that warrior mindset, right? Of unfortunately, conventional medicine isn't going to save you. And really no one is going to save you. It's up to you and your significant other, if you have that, to make a way to let things work out the way it should for a healthier family in general, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And something that I really want to highlight about Victoria and Elijah's story is Victoria's tenacity. Like, I remember you reaching out on Instagram and you were like, so what? I don't remember the specifics, but basically you were like, so what are your sessions like? And because you were like, we've already done this. Like, why should we do this again? Which, guys, this is a great question for everyone listening. If you're considering getting into a therapy and you're like, but we already did it. Okay, it costs money. It takes time, lots of resources. Ask the questions. It's worth it. And do you remember what I said? What did I say?
I don't remember.
I don't know.
I don't remember.
Right.
But I said, I know someone who's told me they've benefited greatly from going to Karindy. And so I said, you know what? I have really nothing to lose right now because we have tried so many things and we've done the releases. Like, what's one more thing? And I'm so glad that I did, because our conversations just led to aha moments and again, just led us to where we're at today, So yeah, I don't remember what I said, but I'm glad I went forward anyway.
But I want to share. So that was one part. And then at some point, because I don't necessarily say, oh, just keep coming. I'll be like, I think the next move is something different than me. Like, sometimes that's not the next move. Sometimes someone needs to just keep coming to therapy and we're working on things. And that is absolutely great. However, I do know with Elijah, I was like, I think he needs OT. I think this is like, and we had already been talking about all these things.
Right.
But just trying to find the right one and all of this. And so really that was my recommendation. I was like, take a break from me, go do OT. And here's the thing, guys, Victoria leaned into really her intuition and was, I don't remember I know you looked into some of the OTs because you were asking me questions about them.
I did.
But ultimately you went, let's move. Let's move.
Yep.
And you did, because you were like, and I think because you were now so attuned to the signs of mold and neuroinflammation and seeing them flare and seeing them, they would get better and then they'd come back up. And you went, step aside therapies. That's not what we're doing right now. We are taking ourselves out of this toxic environment and we are going to let the cells regenerate, let them heal, and let's see what the brain does on its own. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, so you moved, but how did you make that choice of like one or the other? And then that shift, what did you feel inside? Because I know people are listening and they're in a similar situation.
Yeah. So I will say there's a time and place, right, for therapies. Like if even you move and something is still not working, it's good to go anyway and just see where the professionals can help you. But ultimately, I feel like the professional parent is obviously you as the mother or the father. And so for us, it was just, again, we were mentally not in a good place and we were trying so hard to make that house work. We were trying, again, we remediated, and I think we just felt like we needed a fresh start. And intuitively, when I would look at my boy and I would see how different he was with my parents, and how different he was in sessions with you, and then coming back and having that light dim up again, it was like, no, I feel like no matter what we do in this house, things are not going to change unless, and that unless was unless we get out and we really start fresh. And so I don't really know. I feel like a lot of it was truly intuitive. Where that came from, what made me feel that was the right move, I cannot say. And I think that's part of intuition, right? Is that you don't always know where it's coming from, but you know in your heart and in your gut that it's right. So when you lean into it, you go, oh, I don't know why this worked out, but I'm really glad I listened to my intuition. So that's kind of where we were. And then again, just really being on the same page with my husband and thinking about our future. And our future was not in that house. Our future was somewhere else where all of us could thrive and heal. And not just from the mold, but from the emotional and mental scars that had been done from the hardships that we dealt with Elijah and the hardships that we were going through ourselves. So sometimes I just feel like if you're able, turning a new leaf and creating a totally different environment is truly the way to go. And again, it's coming from a place of privilege. Like, I understand not everyone can just pick up and move, but we did everything that we could in figuring out how we could make that happen for the reasons I've already mentioned.
Right. I want to share something that has been amazing for me. And honestly, I think it could be for you too. If you've been around for a while, you know I have ADHD, and finding ways to support my focus and mental clarity is non-negotiable. That's why I'm obsessed with Danger Coffee. Unlike regular coffee that sometimes leaves me foggy and jittery, Danger Coffee is tested and proven mold-free. That means no hidden toxins hijacking my brain power. Instead, I get the clean energy boost I need without the crash. But here's the kicker. It's more than just a clean coffee. Danger Coffee is electrolyte rich, which means it supports my adrenal health instead of depleting it. Plus, it's remineralized, which supports cellular function and even the mineral density of our teeth. As a myofunctional therapist, you know I'm always thinking about oral health. Minerals are key to keeping our teeth strong. So, if you're looking for a coffee upgrade, give Danger Coffee a try. And because you're part of the Myohacker community, you can save 10% with the code Myohacker. Just head on over to dangercoffee.com and use the code Myohacker at checkout. Try it out and let me know if you feel the danger edge. So what would you recommend someone do if they suspect they have mold? Like, they're starting this journey, and just as a parent, you did all of your legwork as far as researching, like, where should they start? What are some things you would recommend that or resources they could turn to?
Sure. So I help a lot of people with mold. They'll come to me and I will always start them off really small before bombarding them with information. So I'd say the first thing, if you suspect there's mold, don't overwhelm yourself with information. There's so much out there, and I feel like it'll put you in a mental state of chaos. And having gone through that myself, just start small. So The best resource I can think off the top of my head is a podcast called Mold Finders. And this was when I was living in an apartment trying to find out how I could break my lease. And he taught me to keep a paper trail of everything. If you live in a house and it's under warranty, keep a paper trail of everything. I would even look for other podcasts like Dr. Jill Krista is really good, a good resource. Dr. Neil Nathan, I think, wrote a book called Toxic, and I had read that one on just how I could heal myself the first time that I had gone through it, and that was really helpful. I think too, just again, the intuition part, like if you have your spidey senses tingling on there's mold in my house, or if you have children and it's not just you that's dealing with it, looking at how your child, like again, for us, the first sign something was wrong was Elijah's eye contact completely stopped at 6 months of age. So it's like subtle changes too, where you're like, that doesn't seem like my son or daughter. That doesn't seem like my child. Like why are they shifting? And if you notice anything in yourself too, then it's something worth really looking into and considering. Unfortunately, we live in Texas, right? And that's a very moldy state. And you can't really escape it.
I want to ask, we'll come back to this in a second, but
sure.
When you notice those changes at 6 months, something that I often will see is moms do lean into their spidey senses. They're like, something's wrong. Mm-hmm. And then friends and family members feel compelled or feel like it is their duty to actually calm the mom and tell her, actually, no, he's fine. He's going to grow out of this. Nothing is wrong. Did you experience that a lot?
I did not. I did with my husband initially. Yes, I experienced that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really say anything to anyone else just because I knew the response that I got when I was going through it myself was kind of blown off. And so I kept things to myself. And I kind of just wanted for things to work out as they would on their own without really bringing anyone else into it. I think I did that because I did not want to be influenced by anyone else's opinion. I'd already had that happen.
You're so strong.
You're so it's strong. Not easy. It's so not good. Easy. But I didn't want to be influenced by anyone else's opinion, and my son's health is ultimately between me and my husband. And so I would just talk to him about it. I'd present him the research. I'd tell him what I'd notice. And again, like just that intuition was so spot on that he had no choice but to say, you were right, and listen to what I believed we should do, and is what we did. So no, I didn't, just because people can be really dismissive of experiences, or maybe it's common for their children and unfortunately they don't have the knowledge or have the desire to have the knowledge, and so they want to believe that where their child is at is where their child's at and there's nothing they can do about it. And like you and I'm sure we can agree on this, we wouldn't stand for that for our children or for ourselves, and hopefully this resonates with others listening, that they wouldn't do that either. So I think the people who are willing to fight are going to find ways to do that without involving outer parties. If that's making any sense at all, that's my answer.
It is. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So are you, I actually haven't asked you this before. Are you doing consults about mold? Like, can people reach out to you? Is that something you now do?
So I don't really do consults, but I'm happy to give advice to anyone. At no cost at all, because it can be so isolating already. There's just so much out there on social media, Instagram of, I'll charge you $100 to talk to me for 30 minutes, when it's like people out there are already spending so much money on doing what they can do. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer as best as I can with resources, because I've been there and I know what that feels like, and it's expensive, first of all. And second of all, it's just overwhelming. Like, where do you start? So people can reach out if they want, if they have any questions at all.
And what's the best way for them to connect with you? Would it be on Instagram or Facebook?
Probably on Instagram. I'm not on there too much, but if I happen to see a message, I would be more than happy to exchange numbers with somebody, and they can pick my brain with any questions that they might have about mold or any of the journey that I've told today.
So what would be, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about resources. Maybe what's just one piece of advice that you would say to a parent who has a child who, let's say they're having difficulty and with solids, making this transition, like what would you say to them right now?
I would say tune out the noise, because you can do all the research on Google that you want, and it'll tell you, keep introducing the same food over and over and over again. And by the 40th attempt, it's still not working. So it's like, okay, this advice that I keep seeing on Instagram profiles or on Google or blogs or whatever, it's not working. You need to tune out the noise and dig deeper. That's what I would say. Just again, it goes back to intuition, right? Dig deep.
So good.
Nothing else, just you, the connection you have with your child, and what does your child need? What is your child asking for? And how can you be someone who advocates for your child? Just you, as the parent.
Well, it has been my honor to work with you and Elijah and see how you advocate, see how you zone in and connect with him at such a deep level. And that you did that even when you weren't necessarily getting feedback from him, which can be a very lonely time as a parent, but you didn't stop. And so I want everyone to hear that even though there can be times when you're not seeing any benefit from it, like it feels like it's a one-way effort.
Yes.
That it still matters. It still matters. So continue to do that.
Yep, it does. Thank you for that encouragement.
Yes. Thank you, Victoria. So again, I'll put a link in the show notes. Everyone can see that. If you do want to reach out to Victoria, since she said you could, I encourage you to, because I think it can be, like you said, very isolating and lonely to go through both an airway journey and a mold journey. Goodness. And so when you have those things, and guys, it's actually more common than we talk about. So I do want people to reach out and connect over this. All right. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Everyone, I hope you all benefit from this, and share with the mom, share with the dad who you think could use this information and is feeling stuck and they need to lean into their intuition. I want everyone to be encouraged to do that. So go ahead and share this. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Myohacker Podcast. Remember, small changes can make big impacts on our overall health and well-being. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review wherever you get your podcasts. This way, more families will learn about this important information and we can make a bigger impact. Head on over to myohackerslp.com for in-depth resources and guides. You can also join me on Instagram at myohackerslp for bonus content and demos. And if you have questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, send me a message. I would love to hear from you. Until next time, let's biohack myofunctional health as myohackers who change the world through intentional action and connection and breathing. Quick disclaimer reminder, the content shared in this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only.